Haven't we all popped into a room only to completely forget why we went in there? Or desperately search for those spectacles that have been sitting right on top of our head the whole time? Of course, it happens to the best of us, and usually we just chalk it up to a bit of tiredness or absent-mindedness. But what if these little moments aren't just funny quirks? What if they are the first subtle alarm bells ringing for something much more serious? In this video, we're going to look at 20 seemingly innocent habits and shifts in behaviour that could actually be early indicators of dementia. Some of these might truly surprise you, as they have nothing to do with memory, as we usually understand it. Do make sure you stay with us right till the end to find out what you really ought to be looking out for, so you can help protect your own brain health and assist your loved ones in good time. Ready to take a look? Then let's begin. Before we get stuck into the list, let's just clarify what dementia actually is. Many people mistakenly believe it's the same as just getting a bit old and forgetful. In truth, it's a much broader, more complex condition. Dementia isn't a specific disease itself. Rather, it's an umbrella term used to describe a syndrome where there's a gradual decline in memory, thinking, behaviour, and the general ability to carry out everyday activities. Imagine your brain is a highly complex computer. Dementia is like a virus that gradually damages its operating system. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia, accounting for between 60 and 70% of all reported cases. Now, the most crucial thing to grasp is that dementia doesn't suddenly appear. It creeps up slowly, and those initial signs are often masked as mere personality traits or simply the result of too much stress. This is precisely why early diagnosis is so very important. The sooner we spot these signals, the more time we have to potentially slow the process down and adapt to the changes ahead. Let's kick off with the first, and perhaps the most noticeable sign: trouble performing truly familiar tasks. This isn't about struggling to learn something new, but difficulty with routines you've been doing automatically, almost on autopilot for decades. Picture someone who has perfected a superb family recipe, say a classic stew or Sunday roast, and suddenly they start mixing up the sequence of ingredients, perhaps forgetting a key element, or standing over the cooker completely bewildered. Or consider an experienced driver suddenly feeling confused on the familiar route to the village or their holiday spot, a road they've taken countless times without thinking. It can even surface in smaller ways. Suddenly struggling to use the telly remote that was perfectly straightforward just yesterday, or finding it difficult to operate the washing machine settings. The critical factor here is the breakdown of what we call procedural memory, which is responsible for retaining our habits and skills. When this system starts failing, simple, automated actions suddenly require enormous concentration and mental heavy lifting. This is far more serious than simple absent-mindedness. It's a genuine signal that the brain is losing its grip on coordinating complex steps and sequences. The second big clue, or something else to look out for, is trouble with planning and sorting things out. Our brains are constantly engaged in planning, from writing a simple shopping list right up to tackling a complicated project. In early dementia, this crucial skill, what experts call executive function, starts to weaken. People find it really hard to make a plan and then stick to it. For instance, managing the monthly budget becomes difficult, paying bills on time, or keeping an accurate track of spending. What used to be routine suddenly feels like an impossible puzzle. Another classic example is following a new recipe that requires focus, the ability to follow step-by-step instructions, and holding a few different processes in your head at once. Someone experiencing early cognitive issues might get completely lost by step 2 or 3. Even strategy games like chess or bridge can suddenly become overwhelmingly difficult. It is vital to distinguish this from simple tiredness. If you sometimes can't face the bills after a long day, that's completely normal. But if this inability to focus on numbers and plans becomes a constant, ongoing issue, then it is definitely a reason to be concerned. The third common sign, and one that often catches the eye of family and friends, is a real loss of grip on time and place. Now, this is much more serious than simply forgetting what day it is. We all do that, especially when we're on holiday or enjoying a long weekend. With early dementia, the person might start losing track of not just days, but months, or even the whole season. They might try preparing for Christmas or the New Year back in July, or stand waiting for a bus on a Sunday when the service is completely different. Spatial disorientation can be even more worrying to witness. They can get thoroughly lost in places they know well, their own local neighbourhood, a supermarket they've visited countless times, or even inside their own home, struggling to find the kitchen from the bedroom. You might see them standing outside for a long time, totally confused about where they are and which way they should be heading. This happens because the parts of the brain that help us build and use those mental internal maps start to deteriorate. These episodes naturally cause tremendous fear, stress, and anxiety. Because of this, the person may become reluctant to leave the house or go anywhere alone. Next up is a point you might not immediately connect with brain function: difficulties in processing visual information. Your eyes might be perfectly fine, but the brain, which is supposed to interpret the picture they send, starts struggling. It begins to fail. A person finds it hard to judge distance, identify colours, or recognise contrasts. This can cause problems when you're motoring. For example, it becomes difficult to accurately judge the distance to the car in front, or to spot a pedestrian in time. At home, this might show up if someone spills their drink by putting the cup right beside the table, or perhaps they trip on the flat, misjudging the height of a simple step. Another concerning aspect is trouble recognising faces. They might fail to recognise old friends or even extended family members. In more severe instances, they might not even recognise their own reflection in the mirror, perceiving it simply as a stranger. Now, this is crucial. This is not simply poor eyesight that can be fixed with a new pair of spectacles. It is purely a problem with how the brain is interpreting those visual signals. So if a loved one is complaining about their vision, yet the optician can't find a thing wrong, it's certainly worth investigating other cognitive functions. The fifth sign we need to watch out for is difficulty with communication, affecting both verbal speech and writing. We all have those moments where a word escapes us, and we resort to saying, "Oh, you know, that thingamajig." But in the early stages of dementia, this word retrieval issue happens far more frequently, often involving the simplest, most common items. A person might suddenly stop mid-sentence, desperately struggling to recall the name of an everyday object, like a spoon or their keys. Instead of using the correct name, they often substitute descriptions, maybe saying, "Pass me that gadget we use to eat soup." Their speech in general can become less fluent and is often punctuated by long, awkward pauses. It also becomes challenging to keep up with the flow of a discussion, particularly when multiple people are involved. They might constantly ask others to repeat themselves, easily lose their train of thought, or give a response that doesn't quite fit the question being asked. This occurs because the vital speech centres in the brain are beginning to suffer damage. These issues are not restricted to talking. Writing skills also start to decline. Handwriting may become messy and hard to read, and new spelling or grammatical errors begin to appear where they never did before. Simple tasks, such as writing a quick shopping list, a birthday message, or a short note, become surprisingly difficult because they struggle to formulate and organise their thoughts clearly on paper. Let's move on to the sixth sign. This is when someone starts misplacing things all the time, and crucially, they lose the ability to retrace their steps to figure out where those items went. Losing your keys or phone? Well, that happens to the best of us. It's just part and parcel of everyday life. Usually, we just mentally run the tape back. You know, right, I came in, put the shopping down here, so the keys must be right next to the bag. A person experiencing early-stage dementia loses that crucial ability. They simply cannot reconstruct that logical chain of events. But it doesn't stop there. Items start turning up in utterly bizarre and illogical places. For instance, you might find the TV remote control nestled in the fridge, or discover their wallet inside a cooking pot. This isn't just ordinary absent-mindedness or being scatterbrained. It's due to a genuine breakdown in logical processing. Over time, this often leads to high levels of suspicion. When the person can't find their belongings, they start accusing those around them of theft. They might sincerely believe that neighbours or even close family members are deliberately hiding their glasses or passport. This then becomes a source of endless conflict and upset within the family, when in reality, the issue lies squarely with the cognitive decline, not with any malicious intent from their loved ones. The seventh warning sign, and this is a big one, is the decline in critical thinking and sound judgment. This is one of the most dangerous signs of all, precisely because it can lead to very serious consequences. The person's entire value system can shift, and they lose the capacity to properly assess or size up a situation. For instance, they might easily fall victim to fraudsters, handing over their life savings for a supposed miracle cure, or blindly trusting those notorious phone scammers. Their ability to manage money and plan financially absolutely plummets. They might make sudden, rash, or highly impulsive purchases, spending large sums on things that are entirely unnecessary. This decline in judgment also manifests in simple, everyday routines. They might dress entirely inappropriately for the climate. They could walk out in freezing temperatures wearing only a light shirt or put on a heavy winter coat in the middle of a summer heat wave. They may stop paying attention to personal hygiene, genuinely believing that it's simply not necessary anymore. Socially, they might start saying things that are utterly out of place, not realizing that their words could easily offend or shock those nearby. They find it extremely difficult to gauge the social context. It is vital to understand that this is not stubbornness or a desire to merely shock people. It is a direct result of the areas of the brain responsible for self-control and analysing consequences beginning to function poorly. Number 8 on our list is withdrawing from social life. Someone who was always the life and soul of the party, enjoying meeting friends, visiting people, or being active in clubs, suddenly becomes a real homebody. They start turning down invitations, often finding different pretexts, fatigue, feeling a bit poorly, or just being too busy. In reality, the underlying cause might be more profound. Firstly, as we've already mentioned, they struggle to keep up with the conversation. They might be afraid of looking silly if they lose their train of thought or can't recall the right word. Secondly, noisy groups and lots of activity can simply cause them to feel overwhelmed and confused. And thirdly, they might just lose interest in things they previously enjoyed. A favourite pastime, be it fishing, knitting, or playing the guitar, is suddenly abandoned. They might even stop keeping up with their favourite sports team, even though they wouldn't have missed a single match before. This social isolation is a very worrying sign indeed. It's not only a symptom of a problem, but also makes the overall condition worse. Remember, social engagement and mental stimulation are absolutely crucial factors for maintaining good brain health. The 9th sign, and often the one that causes the most heartache for family members, is the dramatic change in mood and personality. The person you've known your entire life can become completely unrecognisable. A calm and gentle family member might suddenly become irritable, highly suspicious, or even aggressive. They may easily become confused, distressed, or burst into tears without any apparent reason. Unwarranted fear or deep anxiety often develops. The person might start being afraid to be left alone at home, or even to venture outside. Suspicion is another common characteristic. They might begin hiding objects, or accuse their loved ones of plotting or conspiring against them. Sometimes these personality changes manifest as a complete loss of empathy. The individual can become self-centered, indifferent to the feelings and problems of others, even those closest to them. It is vital to understand that this is not simply a case of their character getting worse. This is a direct consequence of organic changes happening within the brain, particularly in the frontal lobes, which are responsible for controlling emotions and social behaviour. These changes are painful, not just for those around them, but also for the person themselves, who often has no comprehension of what is actually happening to them. Point number 10 ties in closely with what we've just discussed, but it really deserves its own specific focus. It is apathy and a total loss of initiative. The person simply loses interest in everything, and I mean everything. They stop caring what's for dinner, what film to watch, or where they might go for a little stroll. They might sit for hours in their favourite armchair, just staring into space, or endlessly flicking through the TV channels without actually watching anything. The things they used to love doing, chatting with the grandchildren, pottering about in the garden, reading a good book, they just stop bringing any pleasure at all. To start even the simplest action, like having a shower or making a cup of tea and a bit of toast, requires a tremendous push, a serious external impulse. They need constant prompting, nudging, and motivation. To an outsider, this can easily look like sheer laziness, or perhaps even a bout of depression, and certainly apathy is a known symptom of depression. But when we talk about dementia, the nature of this apathy is fundamentally different. It isn't so much a low or sad mood. It is the total loss of that internal driver, that engine that actually forces us to get things done. This happens because the connections break down in the parts of the brain responsible for goal setting and the feeling of reward. The 11th sign we need to discuss is the growing difficulty in grasping complex ideas and abstract thought. Our brains aren't just designed for concrete day-to-day tasks. They also handle sophisticated abstractions like humour, metaphors, and sarcasm. In early-stage dementia, this critical capacity begins to fade away. The individual might start taking things literally and simply stop grasping the point of a joke. They might take an ironic comment or a sarcastic remark completely to heart, mistaking it for genuine criticism. It also becomes genuinely challenging to follow the deeper, figurative meaning of proverbs or common sayings. This problem is also evident when trying to make sense of complicated paperwork, such as financial or legal documents, which require careful analysis and comparing details. For instance, trying to get their head around the small print of a bank agreement, or even just following the instruction manual for a new electronic gadget, can feel like an impossible challenge. Another key sign is difficulty with simple categorization. If you show them items like a chair, a table, and a cupboard, and ask them to name the general group, they might become confused, unable to categorize them under the simple term furniture. This unfortunately happens because the areas of the brain responsible for these higher, more sophisticated cognitive functions are often among the first to start deteriorating. The 12th symptom can be extremely frustrating, but it's vital that we recognise it: the constant repetition of the same questions or stories. A person might ask you the time, and then 5 minutes later, ask the exact same question again, as if they're hearing the answer for the very first time. Or perhaps they will recount the same story from their younger days several times within a single conversation. This is a clear indicator of short-term memory impairment. The brain simply isn't registering new information, which is why, for the person involved, that question or story feels brand new every single time. It's important to distinguish this behaviour from the normal tendency for older adults to occasionally repeat their favourite anecdotes. In cases of dementia, the repetition occurs within a very short time frame, and the person has absolutely no recall of having mentioned it before. They are not trying to annoy you. They genuinely are not aware that they are repeating themselves. A patient and gentle response from loved ones in this situation is crucial, even though we know it can be incredibly difficult. Showing irritation or arguing, such as saying, "You just told me that," will only deepen their stress and confusion. Point number 13 addresses a very sensitive issue: the decline in personal hygiene and appearance. Someone who has always been meticulous and tidy may suddenly stop taking care of themselves. He might wear the same clothes for weeks on end, refuse to shower, or neglect brushing his teeth. An unpleasant body odour may start to develop. A home that was once kept spotless might quickly fall into a state of neglect. This happens for several key reasons. Firstly, due to apathy and a loss of motivation, the person simply lacks the energy and desire to look after themselves. Secondly, they might simply forget the routine, forgetting that they need to take a shower or change their clothing. Thirdly, this decline can be closely linked to depression, which often goes hand in hand with dementia. And fourthly, the sheer sequence of actions required, undressing, turning on the water, washing, drying, and getting dressed again, can become an overwhelming task that causes confusion and distress. While family or friends might perceive this as mere sloppiness or even stubborn protest, it is actually a crucial diagnostic sign. It indicates that the individual is no longer coping with basic self-care routines. The 14th warning sign, and one you might not expect, relates to significant shifts in dietary habits. We often see individuals in the early stages of dementia, especially certain types, developing a powerful, almost insatiable desire for sweets. A person who previously couldn't care less about desserts might suddenly start devouring huge quantities of chocolates, cakes and biscuits. This change is linked to alterations in the area of the brain responsible for regulating appetite and the feeling of satiety, that is, the feeling of being full. Other changes can occur. For instance, the individual might forget they have recently eaten and demand food again shortly after. Or, conversely, they might completely lose interest in food and consequently lose a lot of weight. Some people may begin to eat non-food items, a very serious symptom known medically as pica. Taste preferences can also change dramatically. Lifelong favourite dishes might suddenly cause revulsion, while foods they previously disliked suddenly become highly desirable. These significant shifts in diet are not just a symptom of decline, they can actively worsen the overall condition. Unbalanced nutrition is highly detrimental to the functioning of the entire body and, crucially, to the brain itself. The 15th sign we need to look out for is difficulty adapting to changes. We are all, to some extent, creatures of habit. We feel much more comfortable when things follow a familiar script. But for someone who is developing dementia, any change, even the smallest alteration, can be a major source of stress and panic. Things like disrupting the daily schedule, travelling to a new location, having visitors, or even just rearranging the furniture in a room can totally throw them off balance. Routine, predictability, and familiar surroundings become absolutely vital for them. Sudden changes require the brain to be flexible, demanding the ability to quickly analyse new information and make decisions. And these are precisely the functions that suffer when dementia takes hold. This is why the person instinctively clings to anything familiar, treating it as a real lifeline. If you notice that your loved one has become extremely rigid, resists any novelty, and gets highly distressed when things don't go according to plan, it could be a clear signal that their cognitive ability to adapt is declining. The 16th indicator, and this touches squarely on the emotional side of things, is the loss of empathy. Empathy, that crucial capacity we have to share feelings, to genuinely understand what someone else is going through, and to see a situation from their point of view, is actually quite a sophisticated brain function. When dementia sets in, particularly in cases of frontotemporal dementia, this ability can gradually fade away. The individual often becomes much more self-centred, rather cold, and appears indifferent to the distress of those close to them. They might, for example, make a cruel or offhand joke aimed at someone who is clearly upset, or completely overlook the obvious signs that their words or actions are causing pain. They find it increasingly difficult to read fundamental social cues, things like subtle changes in facial expressions or the tone of someone's voice. They might not register that the person they are talking to is distressed, or perhaps is in a hurry and needs to leave. It is crucial to remember that this does not mean they have suddenly become spiteful or turned into a bad person. What it signifies is that the complex neural networks responsible for social intelligence and emotional response have been damaged. This sort of profound loss of empathy puts a tremendous strain on the family, often eroding that vital emotional connection and mutual understanding they once had with their loved one. Number 17 on our list is impulsive or socially inappropriate behaviour. The frontal lobes of our brain essentially act as a sophisticated set of brakes. These breaks control our impulses and ensure we behave in accordance with social norms. When these critical areas are affected by dementia, the braking system fails. The individual can become disinhibited and impulsive. For instance, they might start saying rude things, or giving inappropriate compliments to strangers, commit petty theft in a shop without understanding the consequences, or become overly frank in public. Sexual disinhibition is also a possible manifestation, showing up as crude remarks or indecent gestures. While this behaviour is deeply shocking and embarrassing for those around them, it is vital to remember the person is not doing this out of spite. They have lost the ability to control themselves and assess the appropriateness of their actions. It is the illness speaking through them, not the person themselves. The correct response in these moments is never to scold or shame them. Instead, you should gently redirect their attention and carefully remove them from the awkward situation. Symptom number 18 is trouble sleeping. Sleep problems very often go hand in hand with dementia, and sometimes they start long before any clear memory issues appear. The specific pattern can vary quite a bit. Some people suffer from classic insomnia. They struggle to fall asleep, wake up frequently during the night, and often end up getting up very early. Others, conversely, have excessive sleepiness throughout the day, but the most noticeable or characteristic symptom is what's known as sundowning syndrome. This usually happens in the evening, just as the sun goes down or twilight begins. The person becomes increasingly anxious, agitated, confused, and sometimes even aggressive. They might pace around the house aimlessly or try to go outside. Experts still don't fully understand the precise cause, but they suspect it's linked to damage in the brain, disrupting the body's natural internal clock. These sleep troubles are absolutely exhausting, not only for the person suffering, but also crucially for the carers looking after them, as nights often turn into a constant vigil. Our next point brings us back to the topic of memory, and this is crucial to understand. The most typical early sign, especially in the context of Alzheimer's disease, is the loss of short-term memory. A person might recall events from 50 years ago in perfect detail, perhaps their first day at school or their wedding day, but they simply cannot remember what they ate for breakfast that morning or what they just discussed on the phone. They might completely forget a recent visit from family or an important event that happened just last week. New information simply doesn't seem to stick or get recorded into the long-term memory bank. That's why they tend to ask the same questions over and over. For them, that information is brand new every single time. However, their long-term memory, particularly for vivid and emotional past events, can often remain intact for a very long period. This disconnect, perfect recall of the distant past, paired with a total blank slate regarding the present, often confuses the person themselves and their loved ones. They frequently think, how can this possibly be dementia? They remember absolutely everything right down to the finest detail. And finally, the 20th sign, which we've touched upon before but really needs its own dedicated spot, is trouble with navigation, even in very familiar surroundings. We've discussed how someone might get lost right in their own neighbourhood, but this can manifest in smaller ways too. For instance, they might have a spot of bother finding the right aisle in the local supermarket, even one they visit every single week. Or, if they're in a large hospital, they might struggle to find their way back from the doctor's consulting room to the main exit. This is all tied to a decline in spatial awareness and the brain's ability to use familiar landmarks to orient itself. They simply lose their sense of direction. This is one of the very first skills that can be impaired, and it is directly linked to the hippocampus, the area of the brain responsible for both memory and navigation. Crucially, the hippocampus is often one of the first parts of the brain to be affected by Alzheimer's disease. So if your loved one, who perhaps always prided themselves on being an excellent navigator, suddenly starts getting lost and needing help finding their way around, this is a serious cause for concern. So, we've covered 20 key signs that might hint at the start of dementia. As you can see, it's far more complex than just having a poor memory. We're talking about shifts in personality, struggles with planning, profound apathy, and even the loss of social skills. Now, here is the most crucial takeaway. Noticing one or two symptoms from this list is absolutely no reason to panic. We all have moments where we are forgetful, tired, or a bit irritable. However, if you or a loved one are experiencing a persistent combination of several of these signs, and they are steadily getting worse and severely impacting daily life, then that is something that cannot be ignored. And now for the single most vital point. Many of these symptoms can actually be caused by other, completely reversible medical conditions. Things like depression, vitamin B12 deficiency, thyroid issues, or side effects from certain medications, all of these can mimic the signs of dementia. This is exactly why the first and most important step is not self-diagnosis based on an internet video, but booking a full medical checkup with your GP or a specialist. Only a healthcare professional can run the necessary tests and determine the true underlying cause of these changes. Thank you for watching this important video right through to the end. If you found this information helpful, please do give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Share this with anyone you care about, because awareness truly is our greatest tool in the fight for better brain health. In the comments below, tell us, which of these signs did you find the most surprising? Have you or a family member experienced similar situations? Let's discuss this together. Look after yourselves and those you love.